To check out all our products, go to musicnomadcare.com. Hey, it's Rand from Music Nomad, here to talk about all the features and benefits of our high-quality precision setup gauges used in the Keep It Simple setup method.
Hey, it's Geoff Luttrell, Master Guitar Tech and owner of San Francisco Guitar Works and Sonoma County Guitar Works, and I'm here to show you how to use all the precision gauges used in the Keep It Simple setup method.
Being able to measure your fretboard and string radius is a critical step in the setup process. Music Nomad's precision radius gauge is packed with features and benefits. The accurate measurements include 7.25, 9.5, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 20. And easy follow to instructions on the gauge gives you the confidence to get the job done right. The premium stainless steel with polished smooth edges combined with laser etched numbers and text ensures years of use. It even comes with a convenient hang hole.
So when we were designing this radius gauge, what we really wanted to accomplish was a very easy to read gauge with the useful information on it that you need to be able to measure your fretboard radius and measure your string radius at your bridge. I find the black gauge is much easier to see the gap between the string and the gauge than the more commonly used silver metal gauges. The black just has a lot more contrast, and I find it much easier to see those small gaps, which are hard enough to see anyway. And then on the gauge, we have laser engraved that your string radius at your bridge is going to match your fretboard radius. And also, if you forget, it's easy to do, you put your gauge about 1/4 inch in front of your saddles in order to measure your string radius at the bridge. Okay, now we're going to measure and set our bridge radius. So in order to do this, you will need to know your fretboard radius. So you can either remove your strings and use your radius gauge on the last fret to determine your fretboard radius, or you can go to Music Nomad's website, and in the how-to section, there's a list of radius, common fretboard radius by brand. I've measured my fretboard radius, and I know that it's a 12-inch radius, so I will set my bridge to that same measurement. To do that, I will use my Music Nomad radius gauge. And this has 4 different radius per gauge, and we're going to use the 12-inch curve. So you know the way that the measurements are used, you have a 7 1/4 radius. This curve is part of a circle that has a 7 1/4 radius, so a 14.5 inch circle. So a very tight curve. If you go up to a 20-inch radius, it's very flat because that is a section of a circle that has a 20-inch radius, so it's a 40-inch circle, so it's much flatter. So that's what these numerical designations represent. It's a section of a circle that has that radius. I like to lift the guitar up and look down the string. So I'll take my radius gauge and I'll set it on the strings in front of the saddles, about 1/4 inch in front of the saddles, and I will just look at each string and I will see what string is touching the gauge. Now, if you have trouble, and I can see right here that my G is a little low, if you have trouble seeing each little string contact point, you can rest the gauge lightly on the strings and then pluck the strings and listen for the string to buzz against the gauge. That's a good way to determine if a string is not touching. You can put the radius gauge on the strings and push it up and down just very gently, and you should be able to see which strings are moving and which strings are not. So when I do that, I can see that all five of my strings are moving, but the G is not, so it's low. So now that I've measured the arc of my bridge, and don't be surprised on your guitar if it doesn't match any gauge. You know, you might put on a 7 1/4 and it hits a couple, and you flip it over to a 12 and it hits a different set, because most guitars that come out of the factory, they've never had a radius gauge put on the bridge. Even if they've been to a shop and been set up, they may not have been done this way. And this really ensures the most consistent playability across the fretboard, matching the bridge radius correctly to the neck radius. So you just want to use the one that matches your neck, and that's what you're going to match your bridge to. I'm going to file at a downward angle towards the back of the bridge. The reason for that is I want the string to have a very clean contact point at the front of the bridge saddle. If the bridge saddle is flat on the top or even falls away a little bit towards the neck, you can get overtones and you can get buzzing you may think it's fret buzz. It's hard to diagnose. So cutting at a downward angle ensures that the string vibrates very cleanly and clearly on the bridge saddle. So by having the guitar oriented in this direction, it's very easy for me to file at that downward angle. In order to file the saddles, I'll need to select the right nut files for this string set. This is a set of 10 to 46s. You may play 9s, maybe you play 11s, but on your string pack, they will list the individual gauges of each string. So what I will do on this guitar is, knowing that this is a 10, 13, 17, 26, 36, 46, I will try to get those exact number files or slightly larger if I don't have exactly that. You can run a file that's exactly the same size as a string up to around 3/1000 of an inch larger and still maintain a slot that's narrow enough to prevent the string from vibrating in the slot and is still wide enough to allow the string to glide smoothly so that you don't have tuning issues. This guitar has a low G string, so I'm going to need to file the other 5 saddles down until the gauge lowers and contacts the G and maintains contact with the other 5 strings. So this is kind of the most work that you'll have to do on a tune-o-matic, is when you have one low string. It's usually not like that. It's usually a couple are low and you bring down the others and reach that. But if you have one low one, you have to do all 5 saddles. So I've got my work cut out for me here. I'm going to start with the low E string. I'll pop the string out of the saddle and I will get my proper size nut file for my 46 string. So the cool thing about these files is you can use them with the handle or without. Sometimes when I'm starting a new nut slot, I'll use them without the handle just for a little better visibility. If I'm cutting existing nut, I'll use them with the handle because it's really ergonomic and easy to control, but I'll just use them both ways so you can get an example of how you can use them to best suit your needs. So I'll start here on the low E string, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to file this saddle about 5 times. And I'm going to put my string back in the socket, put the guitar back up, and I'm going to remeasure. So now my gauge is, I've lowered my E string. I can see that because now my gauge is rocking on the D. So now I'm going to cut the D string down. So I'll pop that out of the slot, grab my 28. So you can see I'm filing at a slight downward angle towards the back of the bridge, and that's going to ensure that the string contacts the saddle at the back, rides up the saddle, and then goes straight out towards the neck without any buzzing or any overtones. Pop that back in, bring it back up. Okay, now I am lower, I'm closer to my B, or closer to that G. So I'm going to bring down the B and the E string, pop the B out of the slot. If you have 5 strings that need to come down, you can just file all 5 of them a little bit at one time and then remeasure, rather than trying to do one saddle at a time. Okay, so now I'm much, much closer in there. My A is still a little bit high, but I'm pretty much in the ballpark. So I'm going to use my A string. And that is it. I don't have a gap between any of the strings in the gauge. I've got a perfect 12-inch radius, and now my action is going to be very even across my fretboard because my string radius at my bridge matches the fretboard radius. Now this Stratocaster has individually adjustable saddles. That means that each string is on its own individual saddle that has adjustment screws to raise or lower that string independent of the other 5 strings. It's very common on a Strat, Telecaster, anything with a vintage style tremolo, anything with like a hardtail bridge with 6 saddles. Sometimes a Telecaster would be a 3 saddle bridge, but it's still the same basic effect of having individual adjustments for each string. So this Strat, with the 6 individually adjustable saddles, I've determined that the fretboard is 7¼ inch radius, so fairly round, very typical for a vintage Fender. So I'll now take my radius gauge and I'm going to sit it on my bridge, and I'm going to see that my radius is off. A couple of the strings are too low, so I'll need to raise those. In order to do that, I will get the correct Allen wrench size for my saddle set screws. So with my 50 thousandths inch Allen wrench, I'm able to raise or lower my saddles by turning these screws to the left or the right. So I will take my gauge, place it on the strings, and look at what's touching and what's not touching. So I can see that my D string's a little low and my G's a little low. So with the guitar back on the bench, I will turn my screws to the right to raise my D and raise my G a little bit. Then I will get my gauge and I will check again to see that they're touching. And now they are touching. So my radius is correct. The final step whenever you've adjusted the saddles on an adjustable saddle bridge is you want to make sure that the saddles are parallel to the bridge base. You don't want them uneven across, because that can cause sitaring or other overtones on the bridge saddle. You want them nice and parallel to the bridge plate so that the string is putting even pressure on each one of the adjustment screws.
To perform your own setup, make sure you check out all Music Nomad's Keep It Simple setup gauges and tools. Not only is the Keep It Simple setup fun, but a properly set up guitar takes your playing and sound to a whole new level. That's Music Nomad quality, raising the bar in equipment care.